Hey guys, it's Coach Tabe, and today I'm going to show you how to make a magnetic 3x3 Rubik's Cube. Alright, so before we get started, what are the things you're going to need? Let's talk about that. Obviously, you're going to need a 3x3 cube. In this case, I have a Yushin Little Magic. These are pretty standard, that's why I've chosen it, and most cubes are going to follow a similar construction to this cube. That's why we're going to use that one. Next, you're going to need some super glue. Now, I like to use the Loctite professional liquid super glue. I don't like the gels. I like the liquid. I find they're just a little bit easier to work with. But pretty much whatever you want will work. What I also like to make sure is that it has a nice small fine tip, so that you can get the glue into the spots that you need. We're going to be working with pretty small confined areas, and you want to be able to get the glue into those spots. Next, you're going to need magnets. You will need 48 neodymium magnets. I'll talk more about those in just a little bit, but you'll need 48 of them to make a 3x3. And last but not least, this is optional. I like to have a screwdriver handy, because what I do is I will loosen the tensions on one side when I take the cube apart. Makes it easier to put it back together. Completely optional. If you're confident putting the cube back together without changing the tensions or anything like that, not necessary at all. Alright, so let's talk more about the magnets. You're going to be using neodymium magnets like I mentioned just a minute ago, and they are going to be the disc-shaped kind. So you can see they are round, and like I said, you're going to be needing 48 of them. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what size or strength to use, but let's talk about magnets just in general. Neodymium magnets are measured by two things, and that determines the overall strength of the magnet. First is the size of the magnet. These are usually in millimeters, and this is the diameter and the thickness. Most magnets for cubes are going to be 4 by 1, that means 4 millimeters in diameter by 1 millimeter thick, 4 by 1.5, 4 by 2, or 5 by 1, something like that. Neodymium magnets come in different grades. Those range from N35 up to N52. And those two things combined together tell you how strong a magnet is. If you ever are talking to somebody and you're asking them what magnets should I use, and they tell you, oh, just use 4x2, or they tell you, I use N35, but they don't tell you both things, both the size and the grade, that's a person not to listen to, because they don't know what they're talking about. Magnets, when you're talking about the strength of magnets and recommendations, you got to have both parts. Okay? And then the last but not least, what you're going to need is a nice work surface. For me, I have a file folder that I'm using on top of my table, because I want to protect the surface underneath. And then off to the side over here that you can't see, I have a plate that I use to put pieces on once they've been glued. You want to make sure that you have something protecting the surface, because glue drips and it can sometimes just be a little messy. So you want to make sure that you're protecting the table and not making a mess. I also on occasion will use rubber gloves, because I can be very messy and I don't like to get stuff on my hands, but for the purposes of this video I'm not going to do that. Alright, and I will include links down below. One more thing about magnets. So you're going to see there's lots of places to get magnets from on the internet. What you want to do is avoid places like eBay, and that's because a lot of the magnets that are sold on eBay are essentially counterfeits, or they aren't actually what the listing says they are. They might say they're 4x2 N35s, but they're actually 4 by 1.7 N35s. Or they might say that they're 4x2 N52s, and they're actually 4x2 N35. Because there's not really an easy way for you to verify the grade of the magnet that you've gotten, other than just noticing it's not quite as strong as you're expecting. So I highly recommend that you go with a reputable source like Goss Boys or something like that in order to purchase your magnets. Now, if you're looking to buy 500 or 600 magnets, and you know that you don't care if they're if you're ordering N35s and it's somebody you've worked with before on eBay, go for it. That's okay. But if it's something a little unusual, you want to be very careful, because there's a real high chance that you'll get ripped off. I know that I have been in the past. All right, and I will include links to the different products down below, so you know what we're talking about. Now, as far as magnet recommendations, I'm not going to give you recommendations, because what I like and what goes well in one cube may not go well in another cube, and I tend to like things a little stronger than most people. So in general, if you're unsure, a 4x2 N35 will probably work in most 3x3s, maybe 4x1, something like that, somewhere in that range. Talk to a few people before you do a cube, and find something that you'd like, and then have people give you recommendations on that. And also the actual cube, the thickness of the plastic, the construction of the cube, all that stuff can make a difference in how magnets feel. All right, now enough about that. Let's go ahead and get the cube taken apart. So I'll go ahead and just loosen this side. So what's your first thing you're going to want to do is take the cube completely apart, of course. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's see, let me find my center cap that I took off. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and set the core and that center cap off to the side. I like to leave the center cap off just so that I can remember which side I started with. Now, you're gonna need, the next thing we need to do is take the pieces apart. Now, every cube is gonna be just a little bit different, but most are gonna follow something pretty similar to the construction of this little magic. And that is, you're going to have, it's a split piece design. What that means is, as you can see, there's a little seam right down the middle of the edge. And then also on the corners, there's going to be seams. And what you're going to want to do is pull those apart. And that can, usually you can just stick your fingernail right in. If you don't have, if your fingernail doesn't work, or if it's not working, you can try using a plastic razor blade. Anything that's real fine and can pop right in there. Then you just pull, and I'm trying to be careful here so pieces don't fall apart. Pull them apart, and a lot of times there will be another piece in the edge, and that is the torpedo. This you don't need right now. Set that off to the side. So then you'll end up with two halves just like that. Set those off to the side, and let's go ahead and do a corner. So same thing. Find a seam, find another seam, and pull. And in this case, corners will have 3 parts to them, and then there'll also usually be a stalk. Some people refer to these as stock, and that's actually a stalk, S-T-A-L-K. And sometimes, on occasion, there are some 3x3s where the stalk is actually built into the corner pieces. On the Little Magic and on most modern cubes, that's not the case. Don't need the stalk for what we're doing. Go ahead and set it off to the side with the torpedoes. And what you're left with then is edge or corner pieces like these. And what we're going to do is we're going to put magnets inside here. Go ahead and now repeat that process for all 8 corners and all 12 edges. All right, so now you've got the your torpedoes and stalks put someplace safe. Set those off to the side so that they won't get spilled. And now what you should have is 24 corner pieces and 24 edge pieces. Now this is a good time to mention some cubes will use a capped design. There's different types of construction. Most are going to use the split piece design that I'm going to show you. Once you're comfortable with this concept, the capped design and some of the other ones will follow along. The concepts that you're going to learn here today are will work on pretty much any cube. All right, you're going to grab a corner and an edge, and you're going to line them up next to each other. Let's go ahead and zoom in just a little more. All right, so we're going to get them lined up with each other and drop a magnet in the corner, and then we're going to put one in the edge, and they will pair up with each other, and the polarity will correct itself. So you want to make sure that you want to make sure that they're lined up perfectly, and then you can adjust the placement of the magnet by moving them. By just pushing on it with your finger. And now the first pair is the one that matters the most. Everything else is going to be based off of this first one. So we want to make sure that the pieces are lined up perfectly with each other and that the magnets are exactly where you want them to be. Once you're comfortable with that, take your glue, okay, and you're going to put in just a drop. And when you do this, what you want to do is make sure that the glue makes contact with the plastic on the side of the piece and the magnet itself. You're going to put just a drop like on top, but you want the glue to hit the plastic and hit the magnet. Okay, and that will form the seal that's going to hold the magnet in place. Now you'll have some people tell you should put a drop down of glue on the side of the magnet first, or on the side of the piece first. That does work. I find that can be a little messy because the pieces may the glue might splash, and this works really well as long as you're careful and make sure the glue makes contact with both the plastic and the magnet. You'll be just fine. I've never had anything come loose in the dozens of cubes that I've done. Now, what you want to be careful of also is that the glue stays inside the piece. You don't want any out here on the top of the edge. You don't want any seeping out of the bottom or running out, because then you'll have pieces sticking together and so on. But just go ahead and put in a drop, just like that. Repeat the process for the edge, just like so. All right, and what you're going to do is once that's done, sit tight, let it sit for a good 30 to 45 seconds, and that will create the seal. The magnet will stay in place, and this is going to be our master pair off of which everything else will be based. So you want to make sure that this one is glued in really well. Just let it sit for a good, like I said, 30, 45, even 60 seconds. Like I said, the method I'm showing you is not necessarily the fastest, but it is the easiest. And one of the ways that makes it easy is by doing it this way. But we want to be careful. Give the glue plenty of time to begin to take effect. Now, it won't be permanent for a good hour, but it will hold the magnet in place after about 30 to 45 seconds. Now, once you've done that, once you've waited, go ahead and separate the pieces. Notice that the magnets stay in place. Set that corner off to the side. Grab another corner. Line up the pieces again. Notice mine aren't lined up now. We're going to line them up. We're going to drop the next magnet in. Line up the pieces. And when you do that, I'll go ahead. Notice that the magnets attract to each other. When you do it this way, the polarity corrects itself. You don't have to keep track of the polarity. Sometimes you'll see some recommendations to use pieces of paper or whatever to keep track of it. Doing it this way, you don't ever have to keep track of the polarity. It corrects itself. Okay? But again, the key is to make sure that the pieces are lined up There we go. Let's get those perfectly lined up. The magnets will correct themselves. And then drop glue in there. And again, you don't need much. I'm using like one medium-sized drop, and that will be plenty of glue to hold that magnet in place. Again, making sure that you're getting glue on the plastic and on the magnet itself. And that will form a seal. It will eventually harden, it'll form a seal, and will hold the magnet in place. And again, you just wait 30, 45 seconds, and that will take effect. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more, fill some time, but that will hold that magnet in place. And what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that process for all 24 corner pieces. Okay, separate that, set that off to the side. Grab the next corner, line it up, drop the next magnet in, line up the pieces, and again, polarity corrects itself. Drop a glue and just wait. Okay, so now I've got 3 done. I'm going to go ahead and cut the video while I do the rest of the corners, and then I'll come back to you for the rest of it. Alright, so at this point, as you can see, I have a paper plate full of corner pieces. All 24 are done. So we've done all the corner pieces first. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process, except now we're going to match up edges with corners. And this can go just a little bit faster since you have all of the corners already done. And so what we'll do, let me go ahead and grab a place to put my finished pieces. So as you can see, since I already have an edge done, go ahead and pair that up, set it off to the side, and I'm going to just go ahead and repeat the process. So we've got to grab an edge and a corner. Drop a magnet in that edge, line things up. It's a little easier to see whether the glue is where you want it with an edge. Just a little drop and a half of glue right there. Let it wait. Let's go ahead and zoom that in. You can actually see what I'm doing here. Okay, so now we've got a pair. Let that sit for about 10 seconds. Set it off to the side. Grab another corner. Grab another edge. Grab another magnet. Drop it in the edge. Line up the pieces. Put some glue in, making sure again that it hits the plastic and the magnet. Give that a few seconds to firm up. And you'll notice at no point have I said keep track of the polarity or any of that stuff. Again, this method takes care of the polarity, takes care of the lining pieces up, magnets up, all that stuff is taken care of as long as you get that first pair correct, and that first pair is pretty much foolproof. After that, everything just works off of that first pair. So then you just go ahead and set that aside, grab another edge, hit it with a drop or two of glue right there on the side, let it kind of roll down, and it'll form a nice seal with the side of that piece. Alright, we're going to set that aside. I'll do one more. So again, corner and edge, line them up, drop a magnet in, make sure the pieces are lined up perfectly. Again, the magnets will align themselves. Hit that edge with some glue. Let it sit a couple of seconds. Set it aside, and this will be my 5th one now, 5th pair. We'll go ahead and do the other 19 off camera and I'll come back to you. Okay, so we've got all the edges and corners paired up. You should have 24 pairs now together, and as you can see, I've got mine spread out on here on a couple of plates. 24 pairs that look just like that one. All right, and now you're probably going to be in a rush to try and put the cube back together. Don't do that. If you're using super glue like I am, it takes at least an hour to permanently set. What you want to do, what I usually do anyway, is I will let it sit overnight and then assemble it the next day. If you're impatient and you don't want to wait that long, go ahead and just wait an hour and then put the cube back together. If you're using some of the fast dry stuff, or some of the gels sometimes will dry faster or they're slower or whatever, follow the directions on the bottle of the glue and make sure that you really do pay attention to it. You don't want to have something coming loose after half an hour or something like that. Making sure that the pieces are exactly, or the magnets stay in place. You want the glue to really have a chance to set. So I'm going to go ahead and let the pieces set, and then we'll come back together. I'll put the cube back together, and then I'll give you some final tips and some thoughts on how to make the process faster, and just some suggestions and things that I've learned over the years. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and the various pieces have had a chance to harden. The glue has firmed up, and if you will go ahead and take a look. If you look carefully, you can see that there's now like a shell around the magnets, and that is the glue that has hardened, and it's going to hold pieces in place. So now what we need to do is put everything back together. And while I'm doing that, let me go ahead and give you some tips. But before I do that, when you're putting the cube back together, I find it's often useful to have another puzzle, like another cube, handy, so that you can make sure to get the corners positioned correctly. Because with the corners, it does matter. Edges, they can be flipped either way, and so it doesn't matter where the pieces go. But with corners, it does matter, and sometimes it's easier to just have another cube handy to show you how to put the right way to put the pieces back together. So let's go ahead and I'll separate everything here and get the corners back with the corners and the edges with the edges. And so let me go ahead and zoom out just a little bit. All right, so that's about half of them. And you can't see, but I'm pulling them from the plates that I had holding everything. All right, just a couple more here. And there we go. Okay. So now then we also are going to need the torpedoes and stalks that we set aside earlier. So go ahead and put the pieces back together. Go ahead and dump those out, and we'll do the edges first. This step will vary from cube to cube. And with a little magic, it's pretty simple. Just insert the torpedo, put the two edges together. So let's go ahead and flip it over so we can see what colors we're dealing with. And essentially, you're just with any given edge color. What I usually do is I just start with I pick one edge color, and then the four that you're going to match it up with, because there are four edges for any four edges for any given color. So 6 possible colors on the cube. It's going to match up with the 4 colors that are not opposite. So in the case of green, for example, you're going to have orange, white, red, and yellow edges that it has to pair up with. Yellow, red, orange, white, but not blue. So that's how you decide which pieces to put together. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and start with red. That just happens to be what I grabbed. And so you just stick the, in this case, you just stick the torpedo in. So I need red and green. Put that together. And blue. So some thoughts on ways to improve things, or tips to be things to be aware of. One thing that you can do to speed the process up, rather than just doing one edge at a time or one corner at a time when you're starting out, what you can do is after you've got that first pair, instead of just, so you've got the edge and the corner together there, what you do, and there, once the glue has dried on that first pair, separate them and do a new pair from each of those. So an edge and a corner from each of those, and that'll give you 2 full pairs right away. And then once the glue has dried on those 2 full pairs, do another 2. Split those up and match up the edges and corners and so on. So now you have 4 pairs, and then 8, and so on, and that'll speed things up greatly. You have to be a little more careful, just because of the glue won't have as much time to dry or whatever. But that is one way to speed things up. And so now I've done red, so now I'm gonna just do orange. Again, let me pull out just a little bit. Also, you want to be very careful when you're putting the glue in, to make sure that where you're placing the magnets, and as you can see here, there's lots of room. But in the corner, for example, as you can see, there are like slots and how the piece goes together. In the corner, with the corners especially, you have to kind of be a little careful that you don't place the magnets or put the glue in a way that the piece won't be able to go back together. And so you have to be very careful of that. On some puzzles, on this one, for example, you can see there's posts on one side and then holes on the other, and every half is the same way. But on some, the orientation on these is a little different, so they have to be paired up in a specific way. So that's another thing to just kind of keep track of. And let's see here, what am I missing? I've got orange, yellow. Okay. And so now that's 4 edges down. So I've done the 4 oranges and the 4 reds. That just leaves me the middles: yellow, blue, yellow, or blue, white, green, white, and green, yellow. So we'll go ahead and get those done. But as you're doing this, you're just kind of going to experiment, and you'll come up with your own techniques, see what works. You'll try different puzzles. Like I said, there are different kinds of pieces. They're not all going to be split piece. Some are capped. Some, if you look at the big sail, for example, the Chi Big Sail, the 68mm puzzle, that has an entirely different mechanism and has where it's almost where actually a piece of the side, or the piece of the edge and the corner actually just come out. So it's almost a full corner, and then there's just a small little piece that pulls out, but that can still be magnetized. Okay, so now we have our edges are all done. Okay, go ahead and set those aside. Now this is where the cube comes in handy. So we go ahead and flip the pieces over so we can see what colors we're working with. Because again, with the edges, as long as you get the right two colors paired up, you can't do it wrong. But with the corners, you absolutely can. And before I started using a cube to show me how to do it, and as a guide, I actually messed up once or twice and had to take corners apart, and that's just kind of annoying. We don't want to have to do that if we don't have to. All right, so we'll go ahead and put the stalk in there, and as you can see, so when red is on top, we need white in front. And so we'll go ahead and do that. And for whatever reason, sometimes this is just a little bit more tricky. There we go. So now we've got red in front, and when red is on top, white is in front, then green is the other color. And so we'll go ahead and drop that in there. And of course you got to make sure you get it all lined up. And there we go. That's our first corner. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of the corners. All right, so now we have everything all together, and you can see if you want to test it out, you can pair up. Let me see here. You can pair up a corner and an edge, and they will attract to each other, and that's how you know that you did it right. But since the method that I showed earlier takes care of polarity, you don't have to worry about this. Sometimes you'll have people say, go ahead and put the cube together without a core to test the polarity or whatever, but you don't have to do that because the way I showed takes care of the polarity, so no need to do that. So then we'll just go ahead and put the cube back together. And if you're like me, you inevitably have the cube come apart once or twice while you're doing this. All right, so now your cube is back together. Go ahead and tighten that tension back on that centerpiece to what it was. Put the center cap back on. And you now have a magnetic 3x3. As you can see, I used a stronger magnet, so you're seeing the click. It might be a little more subtle on the cube that you're working on, but you now have a cube that is fully magnetized and ready to be used. Hopefully you have found this tutorial useful. If you did, go ahead and subscribe. If you want, go ahead and comment. Hit the like button down below. Hit the bell so you get notified. And thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. Thank you, everybody.